Welcome to GreenCars, the podcast. Our special guest today is Mandi Damman. She's the Chief Engineer of Autonomous Vehicles at General Motors. And up next, we're going to ask her all about the next generation of Super Cruise. It's a fascinating technology. We're going to talk about Chinese automakers and why they're able to move so quickly. And then, of course, we will also touch on the importance of EV structures, the basic foundation of the vehicle, which is surprisingly important. So make sure you stick around for all of that and a whole lot more. This is GreenCars, the podcast where we cover the ins and outs of sustainable transportation. I am your host, Craig Cole, and I am joined by the one and only Sam Abuelsamid. He's an engineer, an analyst, the vice president of market research at Telemetry, and of course, my co-host here. And Sam, what don't you do other than pay taxes or something?
I don't know. I rebuild my deck. I do all kinds of stuff. So there's not too many things I guess I don't do major electrical work around the house. I'll replace outlets and switches and things like that. But when it comes to major rewiring, I get professionals.
You're not going to do a service upgrade on your own then? Not that you could,
no.
I don't think.
I prefer my house not to burn down.
Right. That's a wise decision. But the multi-talented Sam Abuelsamid, of course, always great to have you on here. But how's your summer going so far this year?
So far, it's going pretty good. The weather's finally picked up. You know, we had kind of a cool spring, but it's looking good right now. So I'm looking forward to enjoying the next few months.
No big trips planned?
Nothing scheduled right now. I've had a lot of travel in the first half of the year, and so it's quiet for the moment. We'll see how long that lasts.
Right, exactly. Enjoy some downtime, not sitting in an airport or a metal tube at like 30,000 feet. But as I mentioned, our special guest today is Mandi Damman. She's the chief engineer of autonomous vehicles at General Motors. She's also helped develop a whole bunch of different, particularly Cadillac EVs, and she worked on Super Cruise. So there's a lot that we could talk about today with her, Sam. What are you hoping to learn in particular?
Hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about what's going on with the next generation of Super Cruise, which goes from a hands-off system to a hands-off, eyes-off system. So it's more truly autonomous than what we have today from GM. Also, a little bit more about what GM is doing with their future EV designs. A couple of years back, Mary Barra, the CEO of GM, talked about bringing hybrids back into the GM lineup. Mm-hmm. We haven't heard much since then. So hopefully Mandi can share a little more about what the plan is there. Will they do some hybrids? Will they do extended range EVs like Ford and Stellantis and Scout? Or just go off in a completely different direction?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to ask her as well about GM's overall EV strategy, because they've kind of focused more on the high end of the market with their trucks and like the Escalade IQ. They do have the Chevy Bolt, which is back.
They've got the Bolt and the Equinox EV, which are fairly affordable vehicles, especially the Bolt. But even the Equinox, by current generation standards, is a pretty affordable car, starting about $36,000.
Yeah.
So, I think GM, probably more so than most manufacturers, actually has a pretty wide spread of what they offer in terms of electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm. They've got way more EVs than Ford, for instance.
Yeah.
But we'll bring Mandi on here in just a minute. But first, really quick, for help finding your next ride, visit greencars.com, where we have expert reviews, a helpful buyer's guide, there's an EV matchmaker, and much more. Again, that's greencars.com, your hub for sustainable motoring. But now I would like to welcome Mandi Damman to the show. And Mandi, we're so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff to talk about today. But before we get into all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your current role at GM and maybe some of the projects that you've worked on in the past? Because there's a lot that you've done.
Yeah, there's a lot there, but I'm proud to currently be leading several of our electric vehicle teams, as well as some of our autonomous vehicle teams. So I'm the executive chief engineer for the Chevy Bolt, the Cadillac Lyriq and Vistiq, and our battery electric truck. So that includes the Escalade IQ IQL, the Hummer SUV and SUT, as well as the Sierra EV and Silverado EV, and then also leading our autonomous integration. So everything from Super Cruise to the next generation of eyes-off technology.
Wow,
And I've been doing this for many years too. I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is really full circle for me as I've been at General Motors now. This is my 22nd year and had the opportunity to work on even the first Bolt back in 2016. The first time we made the Bolt an autonomous vehicle in our Cruise robotaxis. And the Escalade IQ, I was the vehicle chief engineer in 2022. So really good to be back and leading those teams as well.
So you're doing all the high tech stuff now. What was the first project you had at GM then?
My very first project was in body structures. So when I was 18 years old as a Kettering University co-op, I worked in Pontiac and got to work on body structures across many of our programs at that time. Laminated metal was a big thing. And for acoustic benefits and other reasons, got to learn a lot about that. And then my first role after hiring in full time was also in structures. I was out here at the Milford Proving Grounds working in a structure vibration role, again off many on many of our vehicle programs, as well as doing some competitive benchmarking at that time.
Very
That's
nice.
that's all actually really important for what you do now, especially around electrification, because first, I mean, you've got to have a structure to support the extra weight of a battery. Plus, because as you go to electrification, you don't have things like engines that mask a lot of other sounds, and so the structure becomes even more important in order to maintain a quiet environment.
Exactly right. And that was such a good foundation too. And I don't know how that happened that I started in structures, spent a lot of my career actually in noise and vibration and vehicle dynamics, so critical to our electric vehicles. And there was a lot of this, on the Bolt back in 2016. We were still learning a lot at that time about, what we could do for high frequency switching noises and drive unit tones and any wind noise, road noise. There's different challenges to solve for on our electric vehicles. And then that became increasingly important as I moved to luxury vehicles and had a large Escalade IQ and IQL to also offer a very premium and luxury customer experience on. So you're exactly right. Very important foundation.
Well, I just got back from a cross-country trip in an Escalade IQ, driving from here in Michigan all the way out to Oregon, transporting some rescue dogs. And I can say that you were definitely successful. Your team was definitely successful in creating a nice, solid, quiet environment that was great for a long-distance road trip.
Awesome. And I'm curious how many dog crates could fit in the Escalade IQ?
We had one smaller crate that had two puppies in it, and then some larger crates for the adult dogs. So we could either put five with the puppy crate in there, or four with just the adult dogs, and that was leaving the two front seats and one of the second row seats open. So we had three people in the car, plus up to five dog crates.
I was thinking you probably had to use the frunk for some of your gear in that case
did,
too, right?
We did indeed take advantage of the frunk to carry some of the baggage and some of the assorted stuff that we have for all the dog food and tarps and puppy pads and all the other stuff.
I was just going to say you didn't put any dogs on the roof or in the frunk, I would hope.
No, we did not. We did not resort to using the roof or the frunk for anything that was alive.
Great choice.
That's a smart choice. So, Mandi, it's kind of a tumultuous time in the U.S. for electric vehicles right now. But what is GM's overall strategy with EVs? If you can sort of just lay that out for us.
Yeah, I'd say, EVs are our end game, and we've been producing them even, back to the Bolt that I mentioned that's very near and dear, and continuing to expand our portfolio across the four brands, across several different segments and customer price points. And we're focused on continuing to do that. Certainly, as the regulatory landscape and customer preference changes, we will adjust. And we can do that using our internal combustion engine portfolio and shifting some of the volume of vehicles that we're designing and building and selling to ICE products. But I think long term, absolutely, EVs are where it's at. And for sure, where me and my team continue to focus our efforts on.
So you previously, at one stage in your career, also worked on hybrids. I believe that was probably the most recent hybrid that was in the Malibu, and I think a couple other models. Where does partial electrification, let's call it hybrids, or e-revs, or any other variant in there, where's that going to fit into the GM lineup going forward? Is that still something that's part of the plan? Because it was talked about a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I'll avoid commenting on future product.
Oh, come on. You
Right
can
now
do it.
we're
We're
ice
friends.
and we're friends.
We won't tell anybody.
I really like my job right now. So we're right now we're EV and ICE focused. I think, as the customer preference for hybrids and the value proposition changes, as well as regulatory or environmental benefits, as we continue to keep a close eye on those, as those evolve, it's something that we'll continue to watch and maybe learn more about soon. But for right now, ICE and EV, we do, as you mentioned, though, have a lot of experience, and I have some great memories of driving those hybrid vehicles and awesome buy-off rides. And I think it's a great bridge for our customers.
So you also helped develop the original version of Super Cruise, which came out, something maybe 7 or 8 years ago, if memory serves. And it worked. I was on the first drive they did with Cadillac. We did a couple, 1,500 miles across the southwest of the country here. It worked perfectly right out of the box. It was absolutely amazing. And frankly, I think Super Cruise is probably like one of the most transformative driver aids to come out in like the last 25 years. It's just an amazing technology. But you guys are now taking that to the next level with, it's going to be an eyes-off, hands-off system. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we've talked about our next level of Super Cruise coming out in the 2028 timeframe and focusing that on what is Super Cruise and what our customers know and love, but offering additional functionality and capability with being able to take your eyes off the road for an extended period of time. Right now, obviously, you can be hands off with Super Cruise. I used it on a recent trip to Lexington and was able to go for, gosh, hundreds of miles without ever having to engage, especially now too, is it's just getting better and better from an auto lane change perspective and route following and so on. But I think really expanding that operating domain that it can function in, as well as giving our customers the opportunity to take their eyes off the road, is what we're working on now for this next generation.
So, I just mentioned that trip I did, driving the Escalade from here to Omaha is about 720 miles, and probably about 670 to 680 miles of that were hands-free. So it's an impressive system. There's obviously a lot of challenges as you move from a hands-off, eyes-on system like Super Cruise today to an eyes-off system. One of those challenges is, at some point, a human driver is going to be expected to take over, which is not something that you have an expectation of with a level 4 system like what was done with Cruise. So what is GM's approach to that challenge of the handoff when going from relatively complete automation to human driver control again?
Yeah, you said it with, how we handle that transition and make sure that we've got the right technology in the vehicle so that we can mitigate any safety concerns, and without the driver, the human in the loop, rely on our driving system to maneuver through unexpected construction zones or an object in the road or something that just popped up. There is a lot of learnings from our L4 and our cruise programs that we're able to bring back in, even just as we talk about safety critical systems and having a level of redundancy in them, as well as on the sensors and our compute platforms, making sure that in an unsafe or what could be an unsafe situation, that our driving system is ready to engage and safely maneuver the vehicle, because we can't rely on the human immediately taking over like we do in Super Cruise today. So this is very much bridging. We used to always say that it was two separate paths between what we were doing with Super Cruise and that system compared to what we had going in the Cruise robotaxi space. They're converging in a lot of ways now, and we feel like that will also be a huge unlock in the future as we continue to expand capability that the hardware and a lot of that core software is already built in.
So is there some software from the Cruise program that is being incorporated into this eyes off system for 2028?
I don't know that there's software that's
just the
directly
lessons?
being there. A lot of lessons, as well as a lot of the Cruise team members. As we pivoted our strategy at the end of 2024, many of the Cruise team members that I worked with for years on our robotaxis are now part of GM, and they're working hard on unlocking this next challenge and releasing more technology. So again, I don't know that it's software directly, but a lot of the lessons and integration of what they're really good at with what we can do from a hardware and um, vehicle manufacturing at scale, we're bringing all that together again.
So you mentioned the level of redundancy that you need for this, and when Super Cruise was originally launched on the Cadillac CT6, it had some redundancy that others had not previously done in a vehicle in order to meet the safety needs, like retaining the rear wheel steering on the CT6 to have that backup in case you had a front power steering failure, and of course adding driver monitor system. What other things are you incorporating as part of this eyes off system? Will it have a secondary compute to handle, if you have a problem with your main computer, to be able to get the vehicle to a safe stop somewhere? Are those the sorts of things you're doing, or secondary algorithms for that?
Yeah, I think the major areas are steering, as you mentioned, braking, 12-volt power, compute, and having an option to fail over to other portions of the compute, as well as just bimodal sensing and having more than one sensor to depend on from a perception perspective.
Okay.
So it sounds like the core hardware and software that would enable this eyes-off version of Super Cruise is mostly the same as what's already deployed. Is that correct?
Not the same, it's building on, but there's actually a pretty significant delta there
Ah,
between the system that we're using in our Super Cruise, what we could say Super Cruise 2 vehicles today, and where we plan to go, especially as we talk about these safety critical systems and the level of redundancy that's required.
gotcha. Can you mention what sort of additional hardware might be required for the next gen Super Cruise versus what's in vehicles today?
I'm not sure that we shared that, but I think even just like from the initial images and the property that we showed last fall, we are incorporating LiDAR.
Mm,
Today's Super Cruise is not using LiDAR. We will be. Additional sensors, so more cameras around the vehicle and additional radars. And then, as I mentioned, having the redundancy within our braking system, steering system, another 12-volt battery so that we
mm,
have redundant power, as well as compute upgrades for sure.
gotcha. So will the eyes-off version of Super Cruise? I'm assuming that's going to work on the same like limited access divided highways as today's Super Cruise, but will this system also work on secondary roads?
Over time, we plan to expand, much like we've done with Super Cruise, where there will be an initial launch
Mm,
ODD and certain highways that we can operate on. And then as we continue to mature the system and develop and learn more, as well as validating across many road systems, we will expand out from there.
because geofencing it to those limited access divided highways for the first version makes a lot of sense because it removes a lot of potential variables, right? Because you
Right.
can map those highways extremely well. You've got the precise GPS system, so you know exactly what lane the vehicle is in, and you don't have as much
Mhm.
cross traffic to deal with. But it'd be very interesting to see what the next generation of the technology can do, perhaps on non highways. I'd be
Right
very
on.
interested to try it.
Same.
So today, Super Cruise, the current generation of Super Cruise, is available on, I think, over 20 different GM models in North America.
Mhm.
You're launching it on the Escalade IQ, which is, apart from the Celestiq, is a flagship for GM in North America.
Yeah.
How rapidly do you anticipate the availability of the eyes off system to expand, to proliferate throughout the rest of the GM lineup in the coming years?
Yeah, great question. And safety will always gate us. It always has in terms of, we won't deploy the system until we're confident that it's safe. Starting on one vehicle makes sense, and we feel like the Escalade IQ and IQL, those are the right play, but we do plan to scale quickly across the rest of our portfolio. So starting with the IQ and then bridging into high volume SUVs, more mainstream SUVs, even across, pickups and smaller crossovers, we've got a pretty aggressive rollout that we have planned. And again, it'll be a matter of how quickly we can develop the system, validate it, and ensure that it's safe in those other products for our customers to deploy.
Does that also depend on updating those vehicles with the new electronic architecture that was shown last November at the event in New York with the centralized compute? Is that something that is required to do this?
Yeah, right now we do have that dependency. We feel like it's the right optimization. And SDV2 and then this new Super Cruise technology really go hand in hand. So that is the way that we're looking at it and planning our portfolio.
Are there any concerns of drivers pushing back against this sort of autonomous vehicle technology? They might see horror stories on their Instagram feed or something, but are you guys getting any pushback from drivers out there or no?
Not at this time. And I think we'll continue to offer it as a choice where even, on many of the models that I just mentioned, it won't be 100%. And you don't have to get this level. You can get Super Cruise and be totally happy with that if that's where your comfort level is. We expect, and what we're working hard on is creating an experience that people can't live without. And that's, I think for many people that are using Super Cruise every day, like myself, whether it's for long commutes or road trips, it is hard to get a vehicle without it once you're used to that being part of your drive and kind of taking the edge off having to be engaged for the entire trip. But we will offer options, and as we roll this out too, we'll continue to consider customer sentiment, but then hopefully offer something that eventually everyone wants.
Our producer Ben, I can see him nodding his head in the corner here. He owns a certain, I'm not going to name competitive vehicle that has
brand with
a similar
capability,
hands-off driving system,
but less functional than Super Cruise.
It has some fewer functions. But he's at the point where the trial period is over for the first 3 years, and he's trying to decide if he wants to pay. I think he's going to do it. But to your point, Mandi, it's a technology you can't live without once you've had it, once you've experienced it, once you have the confidence in it. It's hard to go without.
Right on.
So we've seen GM has posted photos of some of the prototype Escalades out there with the hands-off system, and they can show some of the sensors on there. So I assume that you have had the opportunity to spend some time riding around in these vehicles, and I say riding as opposed to driving. So what is share your direct impressions of what it's like to ride in this type of system.
Yeah, so currently we have over 100 vehicles out there, and we're using existing Escalade IQs and IQLs, as well as some ICE SUVs that we have put the sensor set onto, as well as a representative compute. We're operating in several ODDs across the country. Out here in Milford, we've got a route that's quite comfortable. And for me, it's very energizing and exciting to think like we're doing this and we aren't that far away from having this capability in our vehicles. I've had a similar experience with Super Cruise in the early days of almost immediately trusting it. You want to hover your hands, and in this case, like you want to keep your eyes on, and it takes a little bit to get comfortable with the system, but my impressions have been it is seeing way more than I am capable of seeing as a human, with literally having eyes in the back of its head and awareness of what's going on around it. About 2 weeks ago, I rode in a vehicle in California too, and we've got an ODD in the Bay Area where the system performed really well. And we are still very much in the development phase, but as we get more of the vehicles out there, as we mature our software, and soon start to build prototype vehicles of the next generation, I think we'll continue to learn more, and that confidence will just build. But for me, it's very exciting that we're back on the road and getting the development and validation work done that we need.
Well, if you need some third-party feedback on it, you know where to find us.
Exactly.
Right on. You're
We'd be happy to go for a ride.
Yes,
but
we'll do that.
You mentioned how quickly it builds confidence, and that was exactly my experience all those years ago on the First Drive program with the original version of Super Cruise. I sat there for about 2 minutes, with my hands over the wheel, waiting for something terrible to happen. The car just kept going straight, doing what it needed to do, and then after about 2 minutes, I had just crossed my arms and was sitting in the seat. just
Yes.
enjoying the scenery. So it was very good. But the next gen here, you mentioned that's coming out or is expected to come out around 2028. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
So that's pretty soon. That's just
Yes. Yep.
got your work cut out for you then.
We're feeling the pressure of this being a couple years away. Obviously, with transitioning even from an electrical architecture perspective to SDV2, that's something that we're focused on, and that is a large task that the team is all over and making huge strides on, and then layering this next gen Super Cruise technology on top of that. It's all got to come together, and it will. And yeah, I mean, every day is a new opportunity and we're learning so much. But that's where, as I said, having vehicles on the road has
Yeah.
been extremely helpful. And then now getting into the prototype build phase versus like what I would have called the mules or just adding sensors and hardware onto an existing vehicle, truly building them more ground up with the right electrical architecture, hardware, and the latest software in there will allow us to really accelerate our development and get to a point in 2028 that we're proud of and can start getting our customers into these vehicles.
So, to be brutally honest, when the current generation of EVs, the Ultium EVs launched, GM had some issues with software. And I know the company's done a lot of work since then. You've got things like the Sloan Engineering Lab in Warren and a lot of other stuff. Is all of that effort to improve on your software development processes and validation processes, is that helping? Is that helping you move along a little bit faster, a little more reliably, and feel comfortable that will help you get to where you need to be in time to launch this?
Absolutely. And I think it's a balance between leveraging those tools to move faster versus figuring out where do we need to slow down a bit and get it right up front so that we don't encounter those problems down the road. So we have right now, gosh, over 100 hill benches where we have hardware in the loop, and it could be for any system or subsystem. We're bringing those bench owners together to talk about what challenges they're experiencing to knock down any issues. And then we have, a frame out here in Milford that has every module in the vehicle, harnesses. We're flashing that bench with software. That's now leading into a manufacturing frame where we'll be able to test the vehicle through the manufacturing process. And these are all just modules and wire harnesses on benches right now in preparation for getting ready for those vehicle builds. A lot of this we've done in the past, but I'd say our ability to test every night, to increase the number of software releases we have, to do the normal hardware things like pin-to-pin checks and ensure that this is a very stable architecture for the changes and the further development we'll do in the future is where we're spending a lot of our time right now. But as you mentioned, the investment in tools, even AI and what we're able to run every night with different test cases and software debugs has been really powerful already.
So GM was sort of an early mover and shaker in the electric vehicle market here in the U.S., at least at scale. But we're hearing a lot of news coming out of China these days and the strides that they have made in building EVs. Do they concern you at all? Are they keeping you up at night, the Chinese OEMs?
Of course. And, I think they should. I just spent time over there in December. And I think what's concerning and frankly very impressive is their ability to move very fast. And initially, I remember, gosh, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago now when we had a couple of Chinese EVs here at the Proving Grounds and we looked at them and the quality was poor. There was things that we could point out and be like, yeah, kind of ignore them and move on with our typical competitive set. That has changed a ton, especially on software integration and customer facing features. And, I went for a lot of L2++ rides and checking out their autonomous systems over there. And they've made some progress. And those are good vehicles at a very challenging price point. My team just launched the Cadillac Lyriq with L2++ over there. And we were talking last week about how it's going in terms of sales numbers and so on. And that too is just a really good vehicle. I think, our ability to integrate vehicles well and launch excellent electric vehicles is still solid. It's just our ability to compete relative to price and what that looks like moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned launching the Vistiq over there with L2++, which is a term that is typically used in the industry to describe systems that can do point-to-point type navigation, urban streets, respond to traffic signals. That would is that the capability that you have on the China market Vistiq? And if so, it sounds like that's a more advanced system than what we can get on a Vistiq here.
Yeah, it's a different solution. It is more advanced than what we currently have in market today. And in their market, I mean, I got to evaluate for a couple days in Shanghai, and it was really impressive and handled it quite well. That isn't technology that we are bringing to the US. However, as we work on this next generation of Super Cruise and expanding beyond highway, it's something that we're absolutely looking forward to offering our customers in the future.
What would GM have to do to keep up or change in order to keep up with the speed at which the Chinese OEMs move? They seem to be very aggressive, and they're always coming out with something new. Is it a regulatory issue? Do they just have thousands more engineers working for them? What is the difference there?
Yeah, we're continuing to look at this, and even just this morning had a great discussion with many senior leaders across the company on how to increase the speed at which we develop and launch vehicles. And we talked a lot about what's happening in China. One of the things that I learned when I was there in December is even the supply base is running two shifts of engineers. So it's happening in our competitors, it's happening in the supply base. Many of those suppliers too are very hungry for the business and willing to be very competitive, whether it's timing in throwing more resources at the problem or even just from a cost perspective. So there's many elements to that. And we're looking at it, but I think another area that we can leverage too is just on what tools they're using, right? And we're finding ways to use more virtual tools, be less dependent on hardware, take some risk where we can with our AI tools and what we expect from a performance perspective. Of course, still validating and doing safety checks at the end, but learning a lot from them on tools as well as just resources.
Circling back a little bit, looking at China, you talked about your initial part of your career being involved a lot with structures, and what we see with a lot of the Chinese startups is adopting the sort of structure that Tesla kind of pioneered here on the Model Y, using large-scale castings, structural battery packs. Are those solutions that you see value in, and is that something we could potentially see in future GM vehicles, whether they're ICE or electric?
Yeah, we're looking at everything and have actually considered large castings, the many others for some of our future EV programs. I think it will always depend on our ability to integrate the battery pack into the structure, as you said, as well as what's the right way to optimize for that specific architecture. And when we're starting new and going after our next affordable EV or high volume EV program, something we consider hasn't always made sense in the past, but very program specific. And something we'll continue to monitor and potentially move forward with.
To increase your speed, it sounds like you guys need some more potential GMI/Kettering graduates, which both of you guys went to the same school, right? In Flint, Michigan.
Yes, we did.
Yep.
So Sam, maybe if you need another job, I know you wear a lot of hats around here, but you could do some moonlighting in Milford, maybe.
Yeah. At this point, I think I like observing and learning what's going on.
It seems like you've got a good thing going.
Yeah. I kind of like where I am.
You could do it, Sam. I believe in you. Just to wrap things up now, great discussion, guys, but we've got to do our 3 for the road before we let you go, Mandi. Again, that's where we give a tip or a trick to help drivers go green. And sort of the question this week that we came up with is, what's it going to take for electric vehicles to really gain traction, to really take off here in the U.S.? Because we've seen it, they haven't been adopted at the rate I think a lot of people expected or wanted.
Yeah, first thing that came to mind for me is faster charging, especially those DC fast charge times.
Mm,
I mean, we just did this with a Bolt. Super proud of my team that launched the new Bolt, the model year 27, and we significantly improved our charge times, almost 3 times faster
hmm
to get from 10 to 80% in only 26 minutes. I think as we get closer to being able to charge within that range around the same time that it would take you to pump gas and fill your internal combustion engine vehicle, I think that's a huge unlock, as well as, of course, just opening up more charge infrastructure. Another thing that we did on the Bolt with moving to the NACS or NACS charge inlet truly becomes a road trip vehicle. And those charge stops don't feel like you need to fill the time or, the family's bored and ready to move on. It's a pleasant experience and something that's easy to incorporate.
Yeah, I mean, charging has definitely gotten a lot better, but we've still got a ways to go to catch up to the Chinese who are now starting to proliferate megawatt charging, charging in like 5-7 minutes on some of their newer
insane.
vehicles. And that's
Yeah.
we got a ways to go yet. For me, I would say it's still the classic, getting butts in seats because once people actually experience an EV, and not for everybody, there are always exceptions, but I think for the majority of people, once they sit in an EV and experience what it's like to ride in one, to drive in one, that instant responsiveness, the torque that you get, and just the general smoothness and refinement of an EV compared to anything with a combustion engine. I mean, I'm a gearhead. I graduated with what they called an ME hot rod. I specialized in engine design and vehicle dynamics, and so I love the sound of a good engine. But the reality is, most of the time, if I'm just driving somewhere, I don't necessarily want that all the time. And I think when when you look at what most people have bought over the last 20, 30 years, it's not necessarily, performance cars. They want something that works, that's reliable. And, EVs are generally very, very reliable. They start every time. And I think if we get more people to actually experience them, and then having more affordable options in the market. The Bolt is a great start. There's other affordable products out there now and more coming soon that I think that will be a big help, is to have affordable alternatives and get people to actually try them, and then they might be convinced to buy them.
Yeah, and my suggestion would be just general education for drivers. People are intimidated by electric vehicles or even plug-in hybrids. So many folks don't plug them in. And I'm just like, why are you not utilizing the powertrain properly? You could have almost double the fuel economy. So I think there's a big education gap, and people need to learn how EVs work, where, DC fast charging is appropriate versus, level 2 charging at home, which you're going to do most of the time anyway for the vast majority of drivers. And
Right.
also to learn about the benefits of electric vehicles, the quietness that you guys mentioned, the smoothness, the convenience of refueling at home. Reduced maintenance is a huge one as well. There's no oil to change or anything, like no cooling system to flush. So yeah, from my side, what I see, education is the big thing. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here with the podcast. But anyway,
Love it.
Mandi Damman, the chief engineer of autonomous vehicles at General Motors, thank you so much for your time. Great discussion today.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Appreciate you
much.
having me.
It's so cool that both you and Mandi went to the same college. I didn't expect that, Sam. I mean, maybe I should in the Detroit area here, but still, that's very neat.
Yeah, here in Detroit, you find a lot of engineers that have gone to probably three main places. A lot of them from University of Michigan, a lot of them from what is now Kettering University. When I was there, it was still GMI Engineering and Management Institute. And then from some other places like Lawrence Technical University in Detroit and Michigan Tech up in the Upper Peninsula. And then, there's also engineers from all over the world, really, working in the industry here.
Yeah. But fascinating discussion with her. I can't wait to try this new version of Super Cruise. I want the hands-off, eyes-off version because that sounds transformative. I mean, Super Cruise was a huge leap when that came out, and this is going to be another giant jump, I think.
Yeah, I think as an engineer myself that worked on electronic safety systems, I still have suspicions about systems like this. I still find
Rightfully
myself
so.
not able to fully trust them because I know all the things that can go wrong with software, especially with modern software, but any software that's controlling the vehicle. And so even now, it's been almost 9 years since that first drive of the Cadillac CT6 with Super Cruise. On Lindsey Brook and I, he was retired now from SAE. We drove together from Cleveland to Chicago to Memphis over 2 days in a CT6.
You did the leg before me because I went Memphis to, I think, like Austin or something, and then Austin to, I want to say Santa Fe, New Mexico. So it might have been Albuquerque, yeah. Somewhere in New Mexico.
So on that first drive, you mentioned, holding your hands near the steering wheel. I never completely relaxed, and even on a trip I just did, I still find myself having a hard time fully relaxing because I know that there, especially with current generation systems, at any moment it could ask you to take back control, or there are things that can happen on the road that the system is just not designed to deal with, and so I still find myself. The way I've described it, from the beginning, is it reduces some traditional driver workloads, but it introduces new cognitive workloads. Because humans are inherently not good at supervising automation, and that's exactly what you're doing potentially for hours on end. And so, I still have mental debates about whether to trust any of these kinds of systems.
Yeah. What sort of problems do you think they might run into as they work to bring this system out?
Well, I think in some ways it should be somewhat easier going to a hands-free or going to an eyes-off system because there's an expectation that the human is not going to be paying attention during most of that trip. And so that means that in order for that to work, they have to do more stuff. So for example, they're incorporating LiDAR as part of it. They are going to have much more powerful compute. That system is going to be running on the central computer is going to use dual NVIDIA Thor processors, which are extremely powerful. And so that system should hopefully not have some of the, slight quirks that even as advanced as Super Cruise is today, that it still exhibits from time to time. And so I hope that when we get to that stage, a couple of years from now, and hopefully we'll get a chance to sample it before then, but hopefully when we get to that stage, I will be able to trust it a little bit more. Although even when I ride in like a robo-taxi from a Waymo or Zoox or Motional or somebody else, it's still slightly nerve-wracking. I can and I think it's more of a me problem, just because I understand these systems and I know what can go wrong, and the average person probably does not have nearly as much knowledge of it, is not aware of all the ways that things can go awry.
Exactly.
So,
The more you know about like car engines, for instance, you're always listening. Oh, is that a new noise? Is that a problem? Is a rocker arm failing? Is it a push? Or whatever.
Where'd that ticking sound come from?
Exactly. Or maybe I didn't even hear a ticking sound. Maybe I'm imagining it.
Exactly, yeah.
Ignorance can be bliss.
It certainly can.
Yeah.
So
she also mentioned I thought it was very interesting, they're not really focusing on hybrids, plug-ins, or extended range electrics. That's fascinating to me. Because those are such a stepping stone technology.
Yeah, so it never stopped selling hybrids in China and plug-in hybrids. So it's always had those in its Chinese lineup, but they discontinued them here some years ago. And hybrids have gotten extremely popular here in the last couple of years, especially with brands like Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, and Kia. So it's interesting that she was really focused on combustion engines and battery electrics, and I think, to some degree, that makes some sense from a business standpoint, because every additional variant that you add in, you're talking about billions of dollars in development costs and costs to implement that in a factory. And so for GM, it sounds like they want to focus on two core powertrain types, with the intention to ultimately transition primarily from combustion to electric, and not get things too confused. Really focus on optimizing those two, and just make the jump directly from the old stuff to the new stuff.
Yeah, because with a hybrid, or particularly a plug-in hybrid, you've got two dedicated, separate powertrains you're packaging into the vehicle.
Yeah,
and there's so much complexity.
It adds a lot of mechanical complexity.
Yeah, but
interestingly, e-revs are less complex than hybrids. Because you have a bigger battery, smaller than what you'd have in a BEV, and you have an engine with a generator. And the engine tends to be simplified because it doesn't have to handle all the transient operations.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can have a smaller, simpler engine that all it does is drive a generator, which charges the battery. And so you don't have to have a complex mechanical system of gears and everything to blend power between an engine and an electric motor. So it is an easier solution, and I frankly would be shocked if at some stage GM doesn't put e-revs at least into its big trucks and SUVs. Not necessarily in smaller vehicles, but in those bigger vehicles. It's still a really great solution, I think, to electrify those vehicles, to make them primarily electric, but still be able to handle tasks like towing long distances.
Yeah. And I mean, if they wanted to implement a hybrid system and avoid some of the complexity, maybe they could go with a design like Honda's two-motor hybrid system, which doesn't actually have a transmission.
Yeah.
Because it's a series parallel system, so the engine can charge the battery, which runs the car, but then at highway speeds, there's a direct clutch that locks up, and then that allows the engine to power the vehicle directly, where the engine is most efficient. And it's just a brilliant solution. And in fact, I just was testing a CR-V hybrid. Fantastic vehicles, staggeringly good. And the powertrain that Honda has is not quite as efficient as the comparable Toyota hybrid system, but the Honda system feels just so friction-free.
It's close.
Smooth.
It's close enough in efficiency to be essentially inconsequential. The cost savings between the two is trivial compared to what you save between either of those hybrids and just a straight up gas engine. I just also had the Honda Prelude, which has the same powertrain in it, and it is a fantastic system, and also it's a more refined system. It's not as noisy as the Toyota system. And the upcoming Nissan e-Power system is also very similar. It doesn't have the clutch, but it's a true series hybrid where the engine it's more like a range extender, more like an e-rev than a Toyota hybrid, except it doesn't have a large battery and a plug. It's just constantly the engine is constantly a generator for the battery and for the drive motor. So there's some interesting new hybrid technologies out there.
Yeah, definitely. And I like to see the different technologies, the different ways the OEMs get to the same solution, because they all tend to take a slightly different path, and that's what makes things interesting.
Well, that's that's because of patents.
That's true. Like the Ford hybrid system is the same as Toyota's basically, but that's because they essentially developed it at the same time, from my understanding, and they did sort of like a patent swap. This is 20 years ago or so. So that's why
Toyota licensed some of their hybrid patents to Ford. Yes. Ford in turn licensed some of their direct injection and other engine patents back to Toyota.
That's cooperation. I like that. And then we also talked, of course, with Mandi. She was surprisingly candid about some of the stuff that the Chinese manufacturers are doing. Fascinating to hear that their supply base is super hungry. They want the business. They're very aggressive, and they've got multiple shifts of engineers working on things. So they're just throwing a lot more bodies at the problem, it sounds like, than we are here in the U.S.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach to the problem. It's throwing more bodies at a problem is not always necessarily a better solution. But it's one approach to how do you get vehicles to market faster.
Yeah, and it seems to be working for them.
I suspect the cases where you're talking about multiple engineers, or engineers working on multiple shifts during the course of the day, especially at suppliers, that's probably more on the manufacturing engineering side, the engineers that are overseeing the manufacturing processes and everything. So they're, having somebody on staff, if on a night shift, something goes wrong, you have a quality issue, whatever, you don't have to necessarily wait till the next day. You can call down a manufacturing engineer to deal with that. From a design, engineering, and development standpoint, it's a little more debatable how much real benefit there is.
Yeah. Regardless, great discussion with Mandi, and always wonderful talking with you, Sam. And I hope you have a great rest of your week here. This is a good show.
And the same to you, Craig.
Thank you. And with that, thank you all so much for watching GreenCars, the podcast, right here on YouTube. But this show is available from all of your favorite podcast providers. Beyond that, make sure you click the link on screen next to check out another great GreenCars video. In fact, we just interviewed Kurt Kelty. He's the Vice President of Battery and Sustainability at General Motors. It's a fascinating discussion and one that you are not going to want to miss. And with that, though, make sure you keep it clean and go green.